If I had to relearn magic again after whatever it is now, 25 years, one of the things that I wish I would have onboarded sooner is the realization that the biggest external changes happen most often from making internal ones. And this is not just seeing the glass half full. This is not just, oh, my life gets a little bit better if I'm less angry in traffic. That's all true. I'm talking miracle level change happens when you find that internal unlock. And you know, maybe this is familiar, but it's not like this is some great revelation. This understanding was there at the very beginning of my magical journey. I just didn't want it. You know, I wanted magic to be cool ingredients and skulls and meeting people with like cloaks in the graveyard, all that stuff. And you know what? Sometimes it is. But it is nevertheless unavoidably true, and this is a real chaos magic flex, that if this works, and often works better, what do you care? Let's go with an example of what I mean by this internal change and how it works better. So let's say your goal, your dream is to be a famous musician. Now, do you want this goal because that Apollonian spirit of music flows out of you and you can't stop creating and you want to move with and change and transform the world? Or, door number 2, do you want to get so rich and famous that daddy will finally love you and approve of you? Now, in almost no circumstances is it either 100% this one or 100% that one. You nevertheless need to have a system to understand how to distinguish between goal and cope. And you want to use something like the following process. What do I want? I want to be a famous musician. Why do I want that? Oh, I want that so lots and lots of people will hear my music. And why do you want that? Oh, that way I will get the international recognition I need. And what happens then? Oh, well then I will, when you start to get to that bottom point of, oh, well then you're almost about to blurt out, then I can finally go home and mommy and daddy will pat me on the head, whatever it ends up being. Once you drop down to that next level, and it's almost toddler questions, and then what happens? And what happens then? And then what happens? What happens then? You'll start to surface the wound that is contributing to the trajectory of your goal. And I describe it that way because it doesn't need fixing. You don't excise your traumas or those parts that are carrying those aspects of your story, because if you try to do that, you'll just generate more of them and they will dig their heels in even further. As Carl Jung would say, we don't actually heal our complexes, we just get bigger than them. 80% of the value in this process is simply in the surfacing and recognizing which parts of your goal trajectory is that sacred desire and which parts are coming from, which happens to everyone, it's not just you specific, the slings and arrows of being in a body. And one of the things I teach in this general area in the Foundations of Magic course, which is the 6-month course you get as part of the Rune Soup premium membership linked up below, is this idea that you gamify it. This is actually mostly true, but it works the best if you make it a game and assume it is always true in every circumstance, which is every external goal or desire that I have has an internal unlock. And it's for this particular career, it's for this promotion, it's to be in a loving relationship, it's to go on a health journey, it's to improve my diet. Whatever the things are there, what is the internal unlock? We've used in previous videos in this series the idea that you don't self-sabotage when you overeat. You're actually providing nourishment that you haven't got throughout the day. You will surface that with this process. And at that point, you can decide that the unlock is securing that nourishment from other sources that aren't food. And then watch as the external world changes around you. And this is miraculous. Whenever we start with these techniques, and it's why I resisted them so long as a baby magician, we think it should be more electric and more Hollywood in the delivery of its results, but it happens anyway. So here I am back in the wizard hut, and if you've watched the last few videos, you can probably guess what the weather is outside. Back we go. Yeah, so this continuous rain began about 7 months ago, and I was sitting here in the hut with my attendant parts who are upset about it. One of the patterns that I have from my childhood is that whenever there is discomfort, particularly in a home environment, I move. I've moved all over the world. I've moved inside countries. I've moved countries, and so on. And I was sitting here. I'd just come back from South America, and it had rained for 4 weeks. And I was sitting on the couch with my parts, and they were saying, this is really unpleasant. And this comes back to the value is in the recognition. Because I just said to the part that was upset, yes, it is. And not angrily at them. Yes, it is. This is very unpleasant. What we are going through is very unpleasant. The difference between cope and true goals is that cope is what swings in to prevent us feeling discomfort or being reminded of trauma. And I just sat there and said, yeah, this is going to be unpleasant. For context, the spirits and the I Ching told me that I couldn't actually go anywhere else. So I was stuck in between parts who wanted to leave and instructions not to. So it was just, this is going to be unpleasant. And I made peace with that because these parts very often just want to be heard. They want to be heard and know that someone is in fact in control, right? Within 90 minutes, and if you're a premium member, you'll know, my friend Paul, who's the archaeologist in Sydney, said, I've got 6 months because we spoke about him being a producer. Would you like a producer for the time magic course? And obviously I said yes. So I couldn't go anywhere and I couldn't heal my loneliness consequently. But I wasn't lonely. For the first time ever for Rune Soup, I had a colleague who, poor Paul, was also trapped in the weather. But that call came out of the blue. And funnily enough, this reminds me of something that's lived rent-free in my head ever since I was a kid, homesick from school. Oprah says the same thing about getting the Color Purple gig. So she was up anxious and thinking about it constantly for weeks and weeks and weeks. And then eventually one afternoon, she's just, listen, I'm going to give it to God. Whatever happens is what happens. And of course, the phone rings and she gets the job. This is what I mean by the results will arrive like magical synchronicities, like the eerie, like, oh, that shouldn't have happened that way. I've had bookings that have unlocked. I have had all kinds of that strange timing that attends magic that just comes from finding where that internal resistance, where that internal unlock is, and even just holding space for its concerns or otherwise addressing them. So what are you in resistance to when it comes to a particular goal? And the follow-up question is, can you just sit in that discomfort without trying to banish it by fixing it? Can you just sit in that discomfort until it alchemizes? Now, heading off the sometimes histrionic YouTube comments, this does not mean that you stay in dead-end jobs or abusive relationships or any of that stuff. The discomfort, and you know this, the discomfort I'm talking about is on the level of, this is a really unpleasant situation. I'm stuck with the rain and it's bringing up childhood trauma things, right? It's not staying with a abusive alcoholic and waiting for that to alchemize. I think we know the difference. But it does bring us to the most important metaphysical statement of this video, and another way of describing something that I kind of wish I knew earlier on in my magical career, which is you can only fix you. Even when you think the problem is someone else, it isn't. Even when it is, it isn't. Right? Because you can only fix you. The good news out there for, people like me on the codependent, anxious, avoidant end of things is that fixing you fixes them, whoever they are, if they're going to be fixed. And if it doesn't, it will, vibe you out of their life and thus fix you anyway. So there's no intervening or fixing someone else. There is only you. And speaking of, I think it was a YouTube comment, someone asked the other week, what would you do if you were stuck with a narcissist? Stuck with? Well, you aren't. Unless your last name is Fritzl and you're in a basement in Austria, you aren't stuck with a narcissist. You are simply in a situation where the things you get out of being with a narcissist are of more value to you than being alone. I've done a whole video about this called All Your Problems Are Meeting Needs. Very often when people say they are stuck with a narcissist, they enjoy the story of being put upon and having a ready-made excuse for why they aren't able to do things. They also like that savior narrative of trying to help someone who is damaged, which is why I'm using it as an example here. stop doing that. Right? And not because they don't deserve it or any of that stuff, because it doesn't work. You can only fix you. And when you do that, the miraculous will constellate around you in ways that will have to be seen to be believed. And the last observation that helps in releasing resistance to the idea that you can only fix you is very often in abusive situations, perfectly understandable. People confuse the difference between guilt and responsibility. Okay, you are not guilty if you are the victim of abuse. You are responsible for the fixing of you. And we have very understandably parts inside us that are in resistance to that notion until we have some form of external justice or validation. But this is going to trap you in that cycle of incomplete fixedness, of brokenness that is ultimately your responsibility, whether or how you've come by the traumas that you currently carry. And that sounds negative. It's the opposite. Okay. It is terribly freeing because it means you can stop today. You can transform and constellate the miraculous around you today. So we've got a method of interrogating whether we're pursuing goals or acting out of trauma. We've got the gamified frame to help you unlock that. And we've got the repositioning around you can only fix you. There is a final, and it came to me by a strange way. There's a final tip that I want to leave you with, because rather than addressing these things head on your own, becoming aware of them gives you that 80% value uplift, right? But there's another thing you can do, which is to just generally bolster the feel of the system as you move through your life. And I learned this. It's a journaling exercise from one of my favorite, absolutely unrelated to magic vloggers out there, Jay Swanson. He's going through like a family trauma healing process, and his therapist has got him to journal based on these 2 prompts. You list everything I am proud of about yourself from as far back as you can remember, childhood recitals, whatever you want, but a big list in a journal, everything I am proud of. And then the next prompt is, I am a catch because, and then you finish that sentence. Now, I have enough gay little books of emotion going at the moment, so I haven't used this exactly as a journaling prompt, but I have said them out loud in a prayer context. I don't necessarily need to recall them to hand. It depends on where you are with the journey. If you think that's going to be useful to you over the course of a day to be able to list out the 8 or 9 reasons, no more, I'm kidding, as to why you're a catch, have them on your phone. If not, to be able to speak that to your spirit team and to God in a way that feels completely true, okay? I've spoken about Delulu in previous videos in this accidental series, but don't say, I am a catch because I will one day be a rich and famous musician, right? Let's bring it all the way back. In that situation, you would say, I am a catch because I'm really good at music. I know lots about music. I am a catch because I have a great record collection. It can be things like that. And what this process is going to do is just build out that positive sentiment in the field so that it doesn't automatically tip into cope strategies whenever there's a wobble. And the more that it begins to see that, the more it becomes easier for you to go, oh, yeah, actually part of wanting to be a famous musician is to finally get parental approval that I didn't get as a kid. All of that stuff moves into like a 2020 vision if the system has enough energy to do it, if the system is healthy enough to be able to see and either transform and transmute or just go around those parts. Once you get a couple of wins under your belt in this process, once you do the achieving powerful external change by finding that internal unlock, 2 or 3 of them, the Oprah phone calls, and you'll start to not just have a high degree of confidence in this method, but you will also love it. You will also come to love it and want to do more of them. And that's what I want to leave you with. This has been a big part of how I've transformed my health and my business and my happiness and relationships and so on over the last year and a bit. And I'm frankly just getting warmed up. So I invite you to join me.